Hi, so I am joined today by two amazing young women who are from our riding of Oakville North-Burlington, and we're both part of a program called Daughters of the Vote. So Daughters of the Vote was started a few years ago to try to increase the participation of women in politics, and in particular in federal politics, because right now there are 100 women in the House of Commons in 338 different ridings. So we're still, that's an all-time high to have 100 women elected as MPs, but we're nowhere near where we need to be to have equal representation. So the idea behind Daughters of the Vote, which is run by Equal Voice, was to get 338 young women from across the country to take their seat in the House of Commons. And so in previous versions of the event, these young women have been able to come to Ottawa and actually physically sit in their MP's seat. This year, of course, things had to be different. So we went, the program went online and it was virtual, but I'm so excited to have Imaan and Janine with us today to talk about their experience that they just had with Daughters of the Vote. So thank you both for being here. And Janine, maybe we'll start with you. You represented the St. Catharines riding, because I couldn't have two young ladies from my riding, sadly. Maybe you can tell us what prompted you to apply to be part of the program.
Thank you so much. I think it was an appetite to learn more about federal politics. I'm, just for everyone watching, I'm a fourth-year student at the University of Toronto. I am an aspiring journalist and I hope to go into policy as well in the future. And I moved to Canada only 4 years ago. So I had this desire in me to want to find spaces where I could learn more about federal politics, identify the issues in my riding, or identify policy concerns with my community and people around me, and network with people who were struggling with similar things. So I heard from your office that Daughters of the Vote was an incredible program. And I sort of applied not really knowing if it would work out, because I had never really been in a position like that with a lot of wonderful, experienced women in federal politics. So I think it was an invaluable opportunity for me to listen, to learn, to exchange ideas. So that's definitely what got me interested in Daughters of the Vote.
And Imaan, how about you? Maybe you could also tell us a little bit about what you're studying and what prompted you to apply.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So I'm currently in my second year of undergrad. I'm studying political science and public law at McMaster. And so I think, kind of similar to what Janine said, when you see those opportunities that are kind of specified like for women, you kind of realize, oh, like, here's a chance for me to get involved. Here's something that is like a little bit personalized for me. So as I told you before, Pam, it was kind of like on Facebook. I saw it and sporadically just applied. And I was like, wow, like this might end up being something great. And as the program kind of started coming, we would get like emails and updates on who was speaking. And I was like, wow, this is like, there's some really, really key figures here. And, you know, I think it's really cliche to be like, oh, it's inspiring, or, you know, like activism, etc. But like, I think that's so important. Like, I think it's precisely what drives people to kind of want to get involved in those things, like seeing all these amazing women, whether or not you are partisan, whether or not you agree with what they're saying, like ultimately they're women, like, right? And they might be in a position that you want to be in. And so just watching them throughout the day and throughout the different programs, it was just like, you pick up on the little details. You're like, wow, like they were first a student like me, they got involved in this, and eventually they reached that position. So I think that was kind of what drove me to apply. I was looking at what it had to offer, and I was like, what can I kind of take from this experience?
I'm on mute. What do you think, Imaan, that you took away from it? Like, what was your biggest takeaway afterwards?
For sure. So I think I didn't really know too much about like how everyone gets to this such a like a high position in politics, for example, or like, you know, how they excel within their career. And I didn't realize that there are these micro struggles that kind of add up to just everyday things women have to face. And this was kind of highlighted at the event. So, you know, we see all these politicians, we see all these figures, we kind of just read about them like in articles, and that doesn't really give the full story. So to listen to them hear about what they went through and what exactly they did and what inspired them, it kind of humanized that process. It made it seem more personal. I was able to like connect, you know, to someone who I never thought I'd be able to connect to. And just from that, I was able to take that. I think, you know, anyone can have those characteristics that make a really great person, like in politics, a really key figure in politics. And I think, you know, I was just inspired. I wanted to like be like them. I was like, wow, they were just like me. Yeah, it kind of puts a face to like this huge idea of politics that maybe none of us know too much about, don't spend all our time reading about it, but it puts like a personal experience to that. Once you realize they're all just women, they're all, you know, they all had the same struggle, they all went through different things to kind of reach their goals.
And Janine, I mean, you mentioned you just came to Canada 4 years ago. Maryam Monsef came to Canada as a refugee, as you know, and is now, you know, was elected as an MP, became a cabinet minister. What was your big takeaway from Daughters of the Vote?
I think first and foremost, just echoing what Imaan said, when you see something that when you see yourself in someone else, it makes it possible. Just a few years ago, I definitely struggled with feelings of imposter syndrome, feelings of I don't have the right to be here, or my voice does not matter as much. But as I sit here, as an immigrant, as an Arab woman in this riding, I see the power of our voice in this community. I see the power of our perspectives in the policy table, in decision-making processes. And really hearing from Minister Monsef was really inspiring for me, because it sort of allowed me to see myself in the decision-making table, allowed me to see myself as being part of the solution, part of that strategy. Because I think more often than not, we think of women in politics as having this like sort of, you know, easy life, or, you know, you're in cabinet, you've reached that point, but it's a very difficult process, right? Because a lot of it is being on the ground, talking to your community, and that's something that I love and I'm so passionate about. So to be able to marry that side of loving community involvement, understanding the needs of people around me, and also seeing how it's possible to actualize that, just made me feel really, really inspired, as Imaan said, really got me pushing to start thinking about my next step. So yeah, I think that's what I left DOV with.
And even if you don't choose to run for office, I think the takeaways from something like that are so important in terms of knowing, as you were saying, Janine, having a voice and you know, seeing yourselves in positions of power. Because, you know, when I was a kid, almost every elected official was a man, right? And you could, and it wasn't all that long ago when women couldn't even vote. I mean, it's hard to imagine, right? But even at the House of Commons now, you can tell that the women's washroom is in the center block, which is where the House of Commons was really separating the men's washroom into two, because at one time there was no women's washroom for members of parliament because there weren't any. It's kind of mind-boggling. So for young women like yourselves to see yourselves in positions where you can develop policy, and whether you choose to run for office or whether you're working in different fields, I think that's, Imaan, what did you think? Did you think that you were able to take away from that regardless of what I do, I have a voice?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So as you say, like my mind was not automatically just, oh, now I can run for office, now I've been here, right? It doesn't just go directly to that. I think it was just this idea of taking like all these diverse young women from everywhere, right? And bringing them together and just letting them know that like this program is specifically for you. And it was just like, it was crazy the amount of kind of different issues that like I wasn't even aware of sometimes, because people were from everywhere. You know, there was Indigenous delegates, there was delegates from rural ridings, and me living in Oakville, you know, I was kind of, I don't witness like those problems firsthand. So it wasn't necessarily about like furthering your career. It was more so just understanding that there are a ton of women, and what you have in common is that like you are a woman or you identify as a woman, and there are a ton of issues and just kind of like these different things you can relate on, and like you have this opportunity to speak up. And even with the different panels that came and the different speakers, you know, there was a wide range. We had Muslims, we had hijabis, we had Jean Augustine, we had conservatives, liberals, etc. So everywhere you looked, your values or your morals or what you believed in, they were given an opportunity to be highlighted basically and emphasized.
That's incredible. And, you know, even today, when we look in politics and in business, women in general have a long way to go, but getting that diversity that we need, you know, as you mentioned, Imaan, having a diverse spectrum of women speaking to you, Janine, how important was that there was actually representation from a broad spectrum of Canadian women?
I think intersectionality was definitely a key theme in Daughters of the Vote, because the way we were approaching issues, even within committees, even in talking to other women, there was that key piece of intersectionality in policy and the importance of it in the application of policy and the drafting of policy. And I think it gave us the space to voice our concerns and our perspectives and try and think about solutions that we could all agree on. And I think this was a surprising thing. I mean, like Imaan said, we were around people from all types of parties, and I had never met someone from Newfoundland, Labrador. I've never met someone from the Northwest Territories. So it was really incredible to be able to connect on these key issues, but also to understand that at times I live in my Ontario bubble and in my riding, and what parliamentary or federal politics allows you to do is to branch out, to see where you land in this map of issues and how each of us sort of experienced some of the same issues, particularly during COVID. I mean, how it's disproportionately affected people living across the country, how it's disproportionately affected racialized minorities. These were key topics that were not partisan, really. It was a matter of talking about how we have approached these issues, you know, what are the unique challenges that each of us experience. So I think having that lens of intersectionality and really learning a lot from Indigenous women was, I mean, incredible. And I carry that with me for the rest of my life. So yeah, I think it wasn't just about having diverse women around me. It was the fact that the lens that we were going through, you know, committees and sessions and panels was intersectionality.
And I find having that lens is so critical, especially as a parliamentarian, to make sure that I'm, as much as I can, talking to people who do have different experiences, because, you know, like both of you, I grew up in London, Ontario. I've lived in Oakville since 1992. We're extremely fortunate, and I've been extremely fortunate in my own life, right? And certainly during COVID, most of us have had the privilege of being able to work from home. Not everyone has had that privilege, right? Because of lack of internet, because of housing conditions, a whole range of issues. So trying to make sure that we're including those voices is so critical, whether it's in, especially in politics, but also in business, whatever you choose to do. So I'll maybe turn it to each of you to give a last word, and then we'll wrap things up. So Imaan, do you want to start?
For sure, yeah. So just touching on actually what you just said, we living here have had the opportunity and the privilege to, work from home if need be. We have our internet, we have the necessities and the resources. And so for Daughters of the Vote, there is a part of it, a day, which is set aside for a mock parliamentary committee simulation in which you choose a topic, you join that committee. And so I was in the committee that was for issues faced by women living in rural areas. And so just because you touched on that, actually, the witnesses there, their testimonies were precisely about the lack of internet access they had. And they lived in Newfoundland and Labrador, really, really small little towns. They didn't have internet access. They didn't have, they had to drive far away to complete some of their university courses, for example. They didn't have women's shelters near there. They didn't have any resources. It was generally very hard for them to kind of escape that tiny little bubble, right? There wasn't much there. So just as Janine was saying about like intersectionality and providing different perspectives on views, I joined that committee, and I live in a very urban, obviously an urban town. So I was kind of realizing, I was like, wow, like we take those things for granted, like internet access we complain when the Wi-Fi isn't fast enough, if it takes more than 3 seconds to load, that's like a complaint for us. But some people don't have the opportunity to fly through their university courses or to work online and at home, and it just affects a ton of things. And so that's kind of what I really liked about that program, was the fact that it brought together all these voices from so many different places. And for that one weekend, everyone had to listen to what you had to say, about anything you were talking about. So I just thought that was great.
That's amazing. And how about you, Janine?
For me, I think it's a few things. Firstly, the lesson that kind of stayed with me was start somewhere. We are building spaces that weren't necessarily made for us, and that takes a lot of time and patience and grit. But start somewhere. And I think that just learning from all these women and what they've endured and what they've accomplished, I left with a sense of empowerment. I left with a sense of understanding that, when you open doors for yourself, you have to keep the door open for other people that come after you. And it starts locally. It starts with your direct community, but then branch out, start looking at how your community, however fortunate, can assist other places in the country, can help other people, how different communities within this local microcosm reflect a lot of the structural issues in the country as a whole. So where I would go is, where I would start with this would be, start somewhere. Start with what you believe in, with something that you are passionate. Believe that you have a space here and you are welcomed. And I hope to continue in this terrain of politics and policy. And I'm just really inspired by other women, and I hope to continue uplifting other women and supporting other women, because we have each other, right? So that definitely helps in long scheme of things.
Well, you are both. You're both so amazing. My goodness gracious. I'll say you're inspiring because you are, and you're such terrific role models for younger women who I hope will watch this and be able to see themselves and say, well, you know what? Maybe they're in high school, maybe they're in elementary school, and they can look and say, wow, they are so incredible. I want to grow up and be just like them. So you're both incredible. Thank you so much. I'm so excited that the two of you got to take part in Daughters of the Vote, and just thank you for all you're doing for the community, and know that I'm here if you ever want advice or support in what you're doing. And thank you for doing this with us today.